Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is well. It's Halloween, so happy Halloween to everyone out there. Thank you for joining today. I am Randy Halsey from the Broadleaf Group here in Houston, Texas, a end-to-end system integrator, and glad you guys joined. We're doing this presentation on Copilot today in conjunction with a wonderful vetted partner of ours out of Dallas, Texas, that we have been working with for at least a decade now. I know I've been with Broadleaf for over 9 years, and we've been working with Ampio Solutions out of Dallas for at least that long. So without further ado, I'll turn this over to Tyler, and he can introduce himself and the Ampio team.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the opportunity, Randy. And you're exactly right. We've been working with Broadleaf Group now for over a decade, right? So a lot of times, there's things within the Microsoft ecosystem where you want to bring in a partner like us to make sure that, projects are done the right way. And that's why we've had such a long partnership with you guys and lots of opportunities that we worked on together. So yeah, we've been around for 13 years, Ampio Solutions has, and we're based in Dallas. And what I'm excited about this opportunity to talk today is it's a hot topic, right? So Joe, who I'm going to introduce here in a bit, and I were just at a Microsoft partner event last week, and obviously the hot topic was Copilot and AI, and speaker after speaker for 2 days talked about how exciting it is and how we can leverage, Copilot to make us superhumans per se, get the most out of the workday. But also before you do that, to make sure that your tenant is ready and your house is in order. So those are some of the things we're going to talk about today. We do have everybody muted. There's a big group on, and so we're going to have everybody muted. But if you do have questions throughout, please put them in the chat box, and we'll get through those either during the presentation or afterwards, and we'll stay on as long as we can as well. And we are recording it, so anybody who missed it or has to leave early, we'll make sure to get that recording over to you as well. And then reach out to your Broadleaf Group rep, who can get more information about how we can help you or any questions we're covering today. So that being said, I'm going to introduce Joe Califf on the call. He's our solution architect. He's the guy that knows the most about this opportunity at Ampio. Joe was at Microsoft for over 17 years. So definitely this is in his wheelhouse. So thanks again, Randy, and Joe, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Tyler. I appreciate the intro. So I'm going to dive into this without further ado here. I would like to just kind of echo what Tyler mentioned, and I think I'm preaching to the choir here when I say that AI is the topic on everybody's mind, especially when it comes to these large language model vendors, the Microsofts, the Googles, everybody that's a software vendor is jumping on the bandwagon. The conversation today is gonna focus on Copilot, which is for Microsoft 365, which is the large language model, the AI engine that lives on top of your Microsoft 365 stack, your tenant. And it's obviously the focus here is for customers that are in M365 and how do they leverage Copilot to help their organization be more productive. So the $1 million question is, which is all executives are thinking about, and mainly anybody that's a decision maker, is, am I ready for this? Right? Unlike a lot of the technologies that came behind it, Copilot has or AI has serious ramifications when it comes to injecting that technology into your environment for it to be able to leverage and crawl and mine your data at will. So before I talk about this presentation is not going to focus on licensing at all. We're not a licensing partner. That would go back to Randy and the Broadleaf Group. But I just want to touch on it quickly. The licensing model for Copilot is for your individual Copilot license. That's Microsoft is requesting a 1-year commitment. You cannot buy a Copilot license on a monthly basis and then just drop drop the commitment after 3-4 months. They are requesting a 1-year commitment, and a lot of that has to do with the amount of investment that they've had to put into a lot of the compute behind Copilot. So it's $20 a month for 12 months if you want what we call a personal license for you. But for small businesses and enterprises, it's $30 a month. So per user, that's per user. So you're making a $360 per user commitment per year. And there's the Copilot for business, and then the Copilot for enterprise and frontline workers, which is exactly the same price with a little bit of nuance differences between the capabilities of that engine. So let's talk about so Copilot in essence is really, everybody has heard about ChatGPT, right? So Copilot really is just the rebranding of that engine for specifically the Microsoft tenant, the data that lives in your Microsoft 365 tenant. Obviously, it's just like ChatGPT, it leverages a large language model. It actually leveraged quite a bit of the ChatGPT large language model, including Azure AI. So it's got a couple of engines there that it's using. It's obviously leveraging, because this is for Microsoft 365, it specifically targets your Microsoft 365 data using Microsoft Graph. It also, once you invest in that, it also bubbles up or lights up in your Microsoft 365 applications. And when we talk about Microsoft 365 apps, obviously there's plenty, but the ones that come to mind immediately, especially for your workers on a day-to-day basis, are your Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote. The Copilot is actually part of these applications, so it can interact with the user within these applications. And finally, and we'll cover this a little bit later, it also can go out and mine the internet for data. But this is a hot topic that I will cover in a few slides from here. But today's focus is going to be on your data. What does it mean to implement Copilot in Microsoft 365? So the most important piece here is it's built on a comprehensive approach. And I'm not going to cover this a lot because it has a lot of technical details and things that Microsoft, shares publicly with their, with their customers and with anybody that wants to go look. But there is an approach to this, right? Which is security, right? Compliance, privacy, and finally, all that would equal responsible AI. What does that mean? It's a couple of 100-page report, but there is one out there that you could go to. It's called the RAI Transparency Report. It's published by Microsoft and by a slew of community members of a consortium, if you will, about what does it mean to use responsible AI. We've heard about the dangers of AI and the flip side of AI, and that's all just very, meaningful. It's all true. And these large language model engines that the vendors are building, like a Microsoft, have to adhere to certain rule sets to be compliant and to be secure and to be, to ensure privacy for customers, right? And data integrity. So adoption. This is what we're going to focus on today. That's what's on everybody's mind. How do I just turn it on and flip it and I go, woohoo, this is great. Now I have AI. The answer is no. This is probably the first real serious technology in probably a couple of decades where the power of the technology is just as important as the devastation of that technology if it's not done properly. And the approach is you crawl, you walk, you run, you fly. The majority of organizations today, especially, and I'm focused here on Microsoft 365, on people that are living up there, are nowhere near being comfortable walking. They are somewhere between crawling and walking. They're not ready. They're not prepared. Putting it out there is definitely going to provide a lot of value, but could also have some serious ramifications. And this is where it's important to be prepared, and it's important to think about what does it mean to get to the next phase of walking, running. We won't cover flying much because that's just a little bit further down the road, but at least the first 3 milestones of this journey. So let's talk about crawling. So what is that? So the first and most important thing, right? When you want to get, and a lot of in our experience from working with a lot of customers that are starting to think about Copilot and think about AI, the first phase is I want to do an initial discovery, right? This is the stage where IT is involved. Even though Copilot is really not for IT, I mean, of course, IT can use it, but Copilot's beauty, AI's beauty, is that it's for everybody. It's for everybody to do a better job, to be more productive, to be a better power user or information worker. But to take that technology and push it down to all these users, it is IT's responsibility to be careful about how they push it out to all of the users. So initial discovery is crucial, which is working with the C-suites and understanding how do we deploy this and building a plan. The barrier here is while C-suites, and we hear this all the time, they want it out there. They want their users to be effective. They want their users to do, 3 times as much as they're doing today using artificial intelligence. So it's not that the executives aren't looking for this from a technology perspective. There's obviously a barrier to spend. That's fine. We're not going to go into that today. We understand the numbers, right? This is for CFOs to, I guess, arm wrestle with the CIOs and the CTOs to say, am I spending $360 a year or not? That's a complete separate conversation. The conversation is who is going to be my champion and who is not. IT wants it out there. C-suites want it out there. We see this all the time. The organizations or the departments within companies that win the argument of no, I don't want it out there is usually legal. And that's in my opinion and our opinion from looking at the power of that technology, that is legit. Legal and the whole sort of legal ecosystem should actually be pushing back because there are ramifications of pushing the technology out there without thinking through it from a legal perspective and from all the things that we mentioned, privacy, security, all that stuff ends up on legal's desk, right? So we have to be careful about that. And so what is the recommendation to get past the crawling stage? Is one, to ensure that IT and legal are sitting in the same room so that IT is educating legal on what Copilot and AI can do in that environment. And legal can then actually educate IT back on, hey, listen, if it does A, then we're at risk of, B and C. So we go through a plan to say, these are the things that we need to do from a technology and IT perspective to minimize our exposure when it comes to some of these things that legal is concerned about. So the next piece of this is walking. So most of our customers that are, when I say most of our customers, I talk about most customers that are actually really, really been looking at AI for a while now, are starting to get close to the walking stage. So what does that mean? Walking means you have prepared, you have finished the crawling piece, IT and legal have finished documenting everything that is required to keep them compliant and safe and not exposed to liability. The next phase is to walk, is for IT to go in, take that what they learned from legal and what they know from technology and start applying it within their environment. And I will talk through this in a few slides from here. When I say applying it, I'm not talking about deploying Copilot. I mean applying and implementing and doing the things to the data that ensures that as soon as Copilot is lit up in the environment, your exposure, your liability is minimal, and you're not putting yourself at a disadvantage. The idea is that Copilot, once deployed, AI once deployed, is going to actually not expose me more than it's going to actually provide me value, right? We don't want companies to turn it on where one user is now doing their job in 10 minutes and then everybody else is just filing lawsuits, right? Or breach leaking data. So the criteria, obviously, in the walk comes from legal, comes from these non-IT entities within the organization. That's the criteria for responsible, safe, and secure AI, right? And the criteria is handed over to IT for them to ensure that they apply that criteria to the various systems within Microsoft 365. SharePoint, Teams, Teams chat, file sharing in Teams, Exchange, emails, right? Like this is all data that is being crawled and being used by AI to help users become more efficient. How am I securing and ensuring that I'm guardrailing this data, right? And then finally, you have to have a roadmap because you don't get to a stage. This is the one common misconception when we go to deploy these products. It's just like anything else. It's almost like security, right? You don't get to a stage where you do all of these things and you say, I'm ready, and you push the button and you walk away. This is a process. It's a recurring theme. The influx of data that comes into M365 is astronomical. We are generating data more than ever. And the introduction of Copilot is going to accelerate the generation of that data, right? Think about now when we're in meetings, this meeting right now is being recorded and it's being transcribed by Copilot. So just this meeting alone has quadrupled the generation of data because of Copilot. Now I have a recording. Now I have Copilot actually transcribing it. Now I have meeting recaps. So we have to be careful about how we build a process to continue to go back to our tenant, to M365, and ensure that all this data that's being generated is recurringly being secured or being purged or being retained. So there is a roadmap and a process that has to be done. The beauty of this is that, yes, that is a long-term cost. Yes, that is an OpEx, but it will pay for itself in no time because the productivity that Copilot can bring to the organization will immediately be realized in the P&L, right? In your profit and loss. I mean, this is the argument that we have with CFOs all the time, is that yes, if you have 1,000 users at $360 a month, that's a lot of money a year, right? But within a year, you could probably recover some of that cost simply because of the productivity gains and the efficiencies that Copilot brings to the table for all of your users. So running, right? So run meaning you're ready. You have your data in place, you have your process in place, you have agreed with legal, you have went in and you have done all the necessary things that we'll talk about in a few slides to actually push the button to enable Copilot for all of your users, to allow your users safely to start leveraging the technology and realize the efficiencies and gains that Copilot brings to the table. You push the button, Copilot's out there, your users see it, and they start dabbling with it. There are two ways you could run. Between walking and running, we have some organizations that have come to us and have asked us to train their users on Copilot. We're not a training partner, but we're definitely more than happy to refer our customers, and we do all the time. But training really means, how do I really use it efficiently versus just using it to generate just meaningless data for me? Because what you put in, you get out, right? And if it's garbage in, it's garbage out. There is training on Copilot isn't necessarily like a curriculum driven classroom, setting. That's not really how you get trained on Copilot. It's very lightweight training, and we have brought in partners before to train users on Copilot. And it's the reason I say it's lightweight is because it's really simply a shift in thinking. So I'm going to give you an example, which I didn't know until I actually did go to one of these trainings. Historically, we are wired, obviously, because we've been using search engines for a very long time. We are wired when searching to understand that the less you give the search engine, the more results you're going to get. And then the more specific you get in your search criteria, right? The less you're going to get. You're going to be more specific, right? It's the complete opposite when it comes to AI. The more prompting you do for AI, the more you tell it, the more information you give it, the more it's going to give you back, because it really then understands exactly what you're looking for. And that's sort of the training that most of our MCTs, our Microsoft certified training partners, sort of deliver. They're lightweight trainings. And then also some of this training involves, like, how do you use Copilot within your Office applications, within Excel? How do you help it write formulas? How do you help it write a legal document for you, etc.? And finally, I'm really not gonna. I'm not gonna spend more than 15 seconds on this. Nobody is here yet. At least nobody that we know. Nobody is is flying with the AI yet. I think everybody's still trying to grasp the power and what does it take to get there. But optimally, I see us getting there in the next year or two, where everybody will just be pretty much, this will be part of their daily life. This Copilot will be just like owning a laptop. You cannot live without it, or you can't do business without it. We're just not there yet. Okay, so I want to talk about the readiness quickly here, and we'll go through these to understand, what is it that you need to do. So first things first, security, right? If you're not secure, Copilot is just going to be a wildfire. It's gonna actually be the exact opposite of what you got it for, which is a disaster. You have to secure your data. You have to ensure that you are doing things, that you are revisiting your environment to make sure that the right data is accessed by the right people. There's a term I use here all the time when it comes to security, and this is common until Copilot showed up. We call it security by obscurity. We put data out there all day long. And by default, historically, if I don't know it's there, I will never access it. So to IT, it's secure because it's obscure, right? That concept is completely dissipated. It's gone when it comes to Copilot, because now Copilot can see it, and Copilot is going to tell you proactively, hey, listen, Randy, listen, Tyler, there's some data here that you have access to. We had a demo last week where one of our vendor partners that sells some of these tools that we sometimes recommend to customers, went into Teams and prompted Teams simply within their environment. They're a pretty sizable company, and he said, can you list me the salaries of all the executives in the company? It was a prompt to that effect, right? He knows he doesn't know where that data lives. He doesn't even know if he has access to it. He had access to it. He literally had access to it. Teams replied back through Copilot with, I found a few documents that have financial data. And it just started giving it to him, and he realized that he has access. IT never secured it or never paid attention to securing it. Because it's sitting in a SharePoint list that they thought it was secure. If it wasn't for Copilot, he would have never been able to search for it properly, because he just doesn't know what he's looking for, right? So it exposed that to him. So security is a very, very important first step before you get that product out there. Are you securing your SharePoint sites properly? Your libraries, your teams, your channels? Are you sharing properly? Who is allowed to share and how? Do you share externally? There is a huge concept in SharePoint called oversharing, and that's been around for a very long time, right? So it's been around way before Copilot, and we always overshare, right? But the issue here now is that Copilot is even going to expose some of your data to some third party outside of your organization if you are sharing with them, right? Even though Copilot is actually contained to your tenant, but when you open that tenant up to some other user outside of your organization, which a lot of people do, we do it ourselves. We actually open up our tenant to our partners so that they can see our data. So there's transparency. Well, guess what? If I'm sharing the wrong thing with our partners, right? Our partners are going to see that data too because we're opening that data up. So oversharing and sharing in SharePoint and the whole M365 tenant is problematic, but it's not really it's not really like impossible to control and reel back in. Um, there are tools, there are plenty of tools. I don't list any tools in here. They're proprietary third-party tools. I don't list them here because we don't want to show any preference to vendors, but we're more than happy to recommend them during conversations that will actually give you nice dashboards. And Microsoft actually also has like the compliance center, and they have some built-in tools for you to look at this. But there are third-party tools out there that will give you good insight into how you should clean up your data, and you could slice it and dice it to understand who's got what and how do you clean all that up, right? But the tools, though, are just the vehicle. You have to have governance. You have to sit down and identify, I can't continue to just keep exposing myself. Remember, we talked about the process earlier? Well, that's right. You have to have a process in place, which is governance, to ensure that there are certain things that cannot be done so you don't expose yourself down the road. You fixed it today, it's broken tomorrow. You don't want that. You want it to fix it today and keep it compliant and fixed indefinitely. So with security, the next phase would be compliance, right? For some customers that are in heavily regulated industries, that is another layer that you have to worry about. Compliance means sure, I'm protecting my data, right? But am I also um, diving into my data and labeling my data and creating policies for my data, retention. When do I purge my data? Am I purging my data too soon, right? If I'm an SEC or FINRA, if I'm in fintech and, I'm a public company or I'm I'm traded obviously, and I have to rely on SEC regulations. I have to have data loss prevention in place. And I also have retention policies in place. I cannot delete a document before 7 years, right? I delete a document and they find out I'm deleting documents, I get fined by the SEC. So for compliance reasons, which is a byproduct of security, there are also built-in tools that you could leverage. Defender, Syntax, Purview. Some of these tools are designed to keep you compliant, and some of these tools are designed to actually get you compliant. So the governance framework and compliance policies will build those for you, and then you have the tool to implement it and the tool to monitor it and keep it on the up and up. So finally, we talk about privacy. Remember, so let's talk about your data estate, right? So you have a lot of data in M365. And we also, the thing that most customers don't think about or like it just doesn't come naturally is that M365 extends to Azure and extends to other platforms that host data. The simple example I would give here is all your users in M365 have an Entra ID, or historically known as Azure AD. Sorry. So, well, there is data attached to that user, their date of birth, their address, anything that attached to their ID is actually private data. So now we're talking about making sure that you're governing data that's outside of M365. Azure AD or Entra ID, while it is the identity provider for M365, it's living elsewhere. It's living in Azure. It's not within the M365 tenant. So you have to identify some of the third-party data or external data sources that could house sensitive information, and you have to ensure that you are building policies to keep it private. In addition, and we see this all the time today, I'll give you just a simple example because we're doing this. Power BI, right? Most of our customers come to us asking for Power BI, but then they want Power BI to actually connect to external data sources that are not hosted by Microsoft. Well, guess what? Now, Power BI is consuming that data from an external data source. How are you protecting that data? So data governance is just not about M365. If you are leveraging Microsoft 365 to go out and capture data from outside data sources, you have to be careful about these data sources. You have to make sure that these data sources, as they start getting consumed into M365, you are protecting that data, that there's a governance, policy around that data. And finally, insights and visibility, right? At the end of the day, and I think, most of us would agree, you could get the ground, you could build the foundation, you could build the house, and you could put the roof on, you could put locks on, and it's all taken care of. But you still have to maintain and sustain that, right? Everything is weathered. You have to go check your roof every time. The shingles might fly off. You have to have insight and visibility into your environment, and you have to do it on a recurring basis. You have to build a service that keeps you compliant. And the only way you could do that and keeps you secure, and the only way you could do that is a recurring model, a recurring process that allows you to have visibility into your environment all the time. And I don't list it here, but we are starting to see a lot of third-party providers, non-Microsoft OEM is what we call them, that are building tools that are making this a lot easier. Obviously, Microsoft is investing and has always invested in tools. Per AI Hub is a tool that is heavily used. We use it all the time. For example, AI Hub gives you insight into how your users are leveraging AI, right? Are they using it for malicious? What are they searching for? I could go out to AI Hub and I could set notifications and alerts to tell me Randy keeps searching and prompting AI to give him the salary of the CEO, right? Those are red flags that I go say, hey, you are misusing the technology, right? Um, and then insider risk management. So this is very important because one of the things that we see with AI is that there's a lot of insider risk. When users get access to data where they're given more power, they're also given more responsibility. And sometimes insider users are the culprit. They are the ones that are causing the breach, whether intentionally or unintentionally. It's not the point. The point is that you have to be careful with that. You have to continuously monitor that. And obviously, if it's intentional, then you have a user problem. But if it's unintentional, you have an education problem, and you have to go and educate your users on how to responsibly use AI. All these insights and visibility requirements can be done through the Microsoft platform with the tools that they provide, but there are also a lot of third parties right now that are investing a lot of time and money in tools to keep you protected and to provide you visibility and meaningful reporting so you could ensure that your user base is using AI the right way. So finally, this goes back to, I think, the third slide I talked. If you remember, the last piece of there was, it said the internet. I'd like to talk a little bit about this because that's important. That is very, very scary to a lot of our customers. So Microsoft, obviously, we have to trust all the vendors. They have principles that they live by. But the one thing that's very important here that I'd like to talk about is while AI and large language model are leveraging large data sets, and they are mining all data to be able to learn. That's how they learn. It's important to remember that for Copilot specifically, and I'm speaking to Copilot here specifically, it is only crawling your internal data. There are no concerns about copyright infringements or plagiarism, because when you deploy Copilot, this goes back to IT, you tell it to only stay within the guardrails of my tenant. You're not leveraging somebody else's data and learning. Learning is a big, you're not using that Copilot engine to learn using somebody else's data, which could put you at a, which could be liability because you're stealing, let's say, intellectual property from somebody else. It's not doing that. Copilot is strictly focused on your data. It's learning from your data. It's learning from your behavior, and it is containing everything that it returns to things that you have actually created and generated. All it's doing is it's bringing the collective power of all of your users into a single location for everybody to leverage. And with that, I will open up the floor for Q&A and hand it back to the moderator.
All right, appreciate that here, Joe. And Randy, I'm going to bring you back on screen as well. Yeah, it's such an awesome topic right now. And again, Joe, we were at that event last week, and nonstop, it was the buzz, panelist after panelist, right? And so, I mean, stepping back just a bit, right? I think most people here have an idea of what Copilot is and how it can help a business, but I mean, we've been using it internally for quite some time. Do you mind maybe just sharing like just some examples of why, companies would want to, we don't, why people would want to even invest in Copilot? Like what are the advantages of the product itself?
Oh, absolutely. I'm gonna run you through a scenario that makes this like brings it home a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Randy would like that scenario too, right? So as a solution architect, I shadow my sales team to ensure that, when we get on calls with customers and when we're getting on meetings, that I'm able to bring, obviously like you and Randy would bring in the relationship and that process, and I'm there to support you technically, right?
Yep.
Our process internally with all of our partners is that uh, once that meeting is over, hopefully if we've done the right thing and we were meaningful to the customer, they're asking for a statement of work, right? A statement of work that details the description of the service we're providing, the inclusions, the exclusions, the scope, the risk factors, assumptions, and you get the idea. Historically, it usually on average takes me, because I'm responsible for writing the statement of work and sending it to my partner in sales for them to review it. Historically, depending roughly on the size of the job, we're talking about anywhere between 2 hours to 4 hours of writing, because I have to sit there, I have to think through it, I have to make sure that we're being specific, right? We don't want a misunderstanding between us and the customer. We want it to be all on the up and up. Well, today, Copilot, obviously in the past 10 years, I think if I go back and look at our SharePoint list of SharePoint document library of SOWs, we probably have over 800 statements of work that I've written. Today, I could knock it out in less than half the time because I have Copilot help me with it. Of course, I shouldn't tell Randy that, because now when he asks me for an SOW, he's going to say, why isn't it ready in 10 minutes? But it's not just the time it's saving me. It's actually the things that me as a person I miss when I'm writing. So if I go and tell it, please write me an SOW to, let's say, consolidate Active Directory or migrate Active Directory between two domains, it's not only helping me write it, but it's also putting in some of the risk factors in there based on all the stuff I've written in the past. So I don't have to sit there and go, oh, yikes, I missed an exclusion in here, right? it is really, it's just making me a way much better solution architect and making me a lot more effective in doing my job. And that translates to how I do my job with our customers and with our partners.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would even, add one more thing to that, Joe, as me being the sales guy and I'm, setting up opportunities for us. And, in the past, I'd be taking as many notes as I can, right? And, I'm not a solution architect, so I'm not the most technical, right? And so our SA team is on there, they're asking questions, but they can't take a ton of notes because they're engaging in the conversation. So now with Teams, I automatically record every call, right? And then any partner I have, I'm like, hey, can I set up the call? Because it can record, it transcribes that entire call, and then it provides a summary. And this summary is just insanely good, right? It's better than any summary that I could type up, right? So now I can copy and paste that summary, whether it's 6 paragraphs or 16 paragraphs, based off of how the call went, and I can send it to our SA team, and then it just makes writing up the sows even more powerful, right? That we're not missing anything, just taking out the human element of where errors could take place. So
this is a perfect example of AI learning and helping AI itself and then us. Like I'll give you an example. A lot of times when I get the summary from the salesperson, I will actually inject it into the prompt and tell it to write me a statement of work based on that summary. And it will actually write it up and make sure that it captures some of the things. Like it will really know that it'll say, in the summary, it says that the customer is on a 2003 domain, let's say functional level, right? And I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm glad it caught that, right? Because now there's a critical risk factor it adds. So it's that's why we call it generative. It makes itself smarter and smarter.
Yeah.
It's just it's phenomenal how
So
it generates and learns from itself.
So Joe, are you saying that over the last few years, I just thought you were smart? You're
That's probably accurate,
asking questions.
semi-accurate.
Absolutely. And just a reminder, everybody, we'll stay on as long as people have questions. So we are monitoring the Q&A right now as well. So feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box or the chat box, and we can address them as we go. I know, Joe, one of the other, questions, I think you briefly mentioned it on one of the slides as well. And this got brought up over and over again at the Microsoft partner event that we were at. But, what is the first good step in reviewing data from a security standpoint and, preparing the adoption of Copilot? Like what would be the first recommendation that you would do?
The first step would be an assessment, right? Know what you have. Most customers know what they have. They just don't know how it's being had. So you have to get in, you have to have an assessment and understand how you are securing your environment. The simple example, and we're a small company, but the simple example right now is that we don't even, like sometimes we're just so busy. I don't even know, we don't even know internally who has access to what, right? And there's some stuff here that, for example, within the company that I shouldn't have access to, or you shouldn't have access to. And I'm like, I don't know. Does Tyler have access to this? I don't know. Have you ever done an assessment, a security assessment, and what we call a gap analysis to understand how your data is laid out? Nope. Where do you save your HR documents? In SharePoint list, in a SharePoint document library. Who has access to it? I don't know. Let me go look. That's all dangerous. That's very dangerous. So you have to understand the lay of the land, how you're broken out, and to be fair, sometimes the outcome of what you learned is actually the majority of your work, because your house could potentially be a disaster, not in order. And we would tell you straight up, do not turn on Copilot until you clean it up, whether it's going to take you a year or whether it's going to take you a minute. Do not turn it on. Of course, if somebody from Microsoft hears me say that, they'll probably like cancel our partnership, but it's the truth. You will end up in a major disaster if you light up that license before getting your house in order.
Yeah, and I mean, and if you don't do that, right, and you turn it on, I mean, the world of hurt that could, the
Yeah,
implications of that, you could be,
yeah,
trying to figure out for years and years.
yeah. And the problem with it is that just like anything else, you can't take it back. Like you could turn it off, but the cat's out of the bag. Like
Yep.
if you turn it on and now you're exposing yourself, you've exposed yourself. Like
I think
you
to
can't unsee it.
I think to piggyback on that conversation, first of all, great overview of the Copilot life cycle, Joe. When you talked about securing the data and doing all the things, taking care of the house, cleaning the house before you actually turn it on, those are the things that the Broadleaf Group, in conjunction with Ampio, can help you guys with: data loss prevention, data governance, two-factor authentication, securing Wi-Fi networks. That's kind of where we fit in. That's our value add. So if there's things that we can help with in that area, certainly lean on myself and the Broadleaf team for that. And should we need to engage Ampio and all the smart folks there, we can certainly do that. We have them on speed dial.
Yep. Absolutely. And that's why it's been a great partnership over the years, Randy, is because of that, right? So, just think of if you brought, Ampio in any of these conversations, we're just an extension of your professional services team, right? We're integrated with you. We work great with your team, and it's been a great fit for all these years. So that being said, does anybody else have any other questions? Again, we'll stay on for a little bit as well. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A box or in the chat box. But it's been, I've heard this presentation a few times, Joe. Again, it's been such a hot topic. Every time we go through this, I learn a little bit more as well, and I think it's just a great conversation to be having right now.
Joe,
Right,
I can hang in.
I guess I have a question, if there's none right now. This just, I'm guilty. I'm sure there's other people that have been guilty of just going out and downloading the ChatGPT app on your iPhone or your Android device. What are the caveats of that? We're talking about Copilot more from I guess a corporate
Yeah.
conversation, but what about for the personal user, right?
So
And there's everybody on this call is subject to that too, right? Because we all have cell phones, I'm sure.
yeah.
And what are the caveats or the ramifications of turning on ChatGPT or something of the likes of Copilot without doing certain things first?
So actually, my recommendation would be go do it, right? Go do it with reckless abandon, because it'll give you insight on the power of the large language models, because Copilot is using the same LLM. There are zero concerns about enabling or signing up for ChatGPT 4.0 or whatever you sign up for. There's zero concern about company data because it cannot crawl into your tenant, right? So from a corporate perspective, from a business perspective, if I go and turn on ChatGPT and I start prompting it and learning from it, my phone, whatever, there's a huge separation between what it's doing and what it's learning and our corporate data. So there's really zero concerns. It cannot come in. It cannot breach the wall, right?
Okay.
Of course, the other way around is not the truth. As I mentioned, by default, Copilot isn't really going out to the internet and learning from those large language models, but it can be if you turn it on. That's an IT decision. But I would strongly recommend that you do go out as a corporate user, even if you're not a decision maker, and leverage ChatGPT to understand the power and the value, because you could be the advocate for your C-suite or for your organization to actually deploy Copilot. It is a phenomenal product. What you do with it on your personal time is your personal business, obviously. But there is really, I wouldn't be concerned about it leaking any corporate data. Just because you are inside the firewall, it cannot touch that data.
Well, I'm glad that was the recommendation, because that's what I'd already done. So that was a great recommendation. Yeah.
So going back to the corporate side, Joe, so we did have a question here from someone that looks like they already enabled Copilot.
Yeah,
And
I
so it's
see. I see.
asking,
Robert asked a great question.
yeah.
So yeah, that is a great
So let's read that
question.
off so everybody can see that question. So if you've already enabled Copilot and you later turn on file securities for sensitive data, is it then too late because Copilot has already learned that info? Or does it see that you have set files as private and then will not report on those files?
It's the latter. So yes, Robert, it's the latter. It is personalized, so it's identity based. That's why obviously, you could turn it on and off per user. So if you turn on Copilot for me, right, you buy me the license, I'm your employee, and I go out and I say, what's Robert's salary? And it starts mining, right? Because it's running ad hoc. It's an on-demand engine, right? It's learning, but it also does verifications all the time. So I go, what's Robert's salary? And it starts mining, goes, oh, I see a file with Robert's salary in there. It sends it to me. I click on it. I open. I'm like, man, Robert's making some serious money, right? If you immediately secure that file tonight after work, and I come in the morning and I'm like, you know what? I forgot what he was making. And I search again, it's going to come back and tell me, I don't know. I don't know what Robert's salary is. Because guess what? It hits the file. It sees that the file has your salary. It cross-references it with my permissions, and it'll come back and say, no data can be returned for Robert's salary because I don't have access to the file. Yeah, great question. So it doesn't, so I don't want to get into the technical details much, but while the engine does cache, it also does what you call result verification every time it's prompted. And that's the reason, outside of the learning piece, that's the reason why it is very, very compute heavy, because it's literally nonstop. It's just nonstop.
Terrific. Thanks, Joe. All right. Well, that looks like all the questions we have. Randy, if you want to maybe bring it home and let folks know how they can contact you, if if they want to know more about Copilot and being ready, make sure their tenant's ready.
Yeah, so broadleafgroup.com is the website. Direct connect would be R. Hulsey, HULSEY at broadleafgroup.com. We would align you guys with a sales rep, account manager that would handle your account, and they could facilitate any of the needs and orchestrate any calls, any research, any meetings that need to take place. So that's what they're here for. Great team that I have here. And I appreciate everybody jumping on and being part of a wonderful technology for sure.
All right. Thanks for the opportunity, Randy. Really appreciate it.
Thank
Awesome.
you all. You have a great rest of the week and a great weekend. Talk soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.